And we also just learned that calcium without the magnesium is toxic. But they prescribe twice as much calcium than magnesium. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I don't never feel pain, cause I don't feel too much pain. Money.
Yeah, freedom over failure. Tell them freedom over failure.
Freedom over failure.
I know that's right.
Put your freedom over failure.
Okay, so it was a point in time when I had high blood pressure, high cholesterol, I was pre-diabetic, and I was overweight. Okay, and somebody I knew or heard of, a relative of somebody I knew. Okay, they was in their 30s. They were they was in their 30s, and they seemed to be healthy. Didn't have any other health issues. A little bit after I met him, he dies of an aneurysm. Okay, and that was some years ago. And since then, there's been other like unexplained deaths and people who seem to be healthy who die suddenly. You know, a lot of times from the aneurysms, people have been having heart attacks and even have heart issues, at least that we know about. And then, of course, there's the obvious people who, struggling with different health issues, and then they pass. So what I'm saying that to say that sometimes we're not as healthy as we think we are. If we're eating crazy and we live in a stressful life, you cannot sit here and say that I'm healthy just because your doctor said so. Your doctor really doesn't have incentive to tell you the truth one way or another. They'll make more money by leading you to believe that you're healthy to let a disease develop to something a little bit more advanced, so they can prescribe you to a prescription that needs to really make their bread. Not saying that this is the case for every single doctor or even the majority, but it does happen. Okay, so it's something we got to take our health serious. Now, the number one cause, or the only cause I would say, for a disease, and I'm not going to say mucus, all right, but it's imbalance. Okay, it's imbalance of some sort, nutrient imbalance of some sort, one way or another. So right now we're gonna go over the 5 electrolytes. There's 21 essential nutrients. It's really more, but 21 known, I should say, essential nutrients, and there's 5 of those are electrolytes. That's what we're gonna go over. Okay, so I'm gonna write down the 5 electrolytes. We got calcium, right? We got magnesium. We got sodium. People don't even know that we need sodium. They demonize it to death. We got potassium. And we got phosphorus. So here's the thing. They teach us what? They drive calcium down our throats, right? Because of the dairy campaign. Got milk. Milk does the body good. You need to get calcium for strong bones. The older you get, the more calcium they prescribe to you. Which is irresponsible to keep prescribed to, promote calcium to death without telling you that you should need magnesium as well. Because if you're taking calcium without magnesium, that calcium then becomes toxic. This is why you see higher rates of more fragile bones with more dairy consumption, because they are magnesium deficient. Most of the population is magnesium deficient. For every milligram of calcium you take, you need a milligram of magnesium. 1-to-1 ratio. Now this is what's interesting. Most nutritionists will tell you that, right? They'll tell you, yeah, for every milligram of calcium you take, you need at least a milligram of magnesium. This same nutritionist, they put on them recommended daily values that you need about 1,000 milligrams of calcium, but will only tell you to take at least 500 milligrams of magnesium. Now, we just learned that you need a 1-to-1 ratio, and we also just learned that calcium without the magnesium is toxic. But they prescribe twice as much calcium than magnesium. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? You'll be better off flipping this on the reverse. You'll be better off taking just 500 milligrams of calcium and 1,000 milligrams of magnesium. There's no studies that we could find as far as food is concerned that having too much magnesium has detrimental effects, but they do have that for calcium. So how can we promote it this way. Everybody knows about calcium. Nobody knows about magnesium. By the way, this is things that you want to get from the food only. Okay? I'm not really into supplements like that. Something else. Sodium and potassium, right? You should take twice as much potassium as you do sodium. Twice as much potassium as you do sodium. A lot of us, you know, when you have high blood pressure, like I had high blood pressure, but I've seen it before. And the doctor would just tell them, you know, lower your sodium and take this medicine. Get your ass up out of here. You know what I'm saying? And I've never known of anybody curing themselves with the medicine. And it always was a struggle lowering the salt. They'll lower it for a while. Weeks later, they'll binge and just go crazy eating pork chops and chips and everything else. All the salty stuff. So then I learned, actually, it's not about lowering your sodium. It's about raising your potassium. Because you need twice as much potassium as sodium. How often does the doctor tell you to increase your potassium? As opposed to just lowering your sodium. This is essential. Once again, these are essential nutrients. There's 21 essential nutrients. These are the 5 electrolytes. And you only know, really only shove calcium down your throat. Ironically, it's tied to the dairy industry. They tell you to lower sodium, never tell you to up your potassium. They rarely tell you anything about magnesium. Most people don't even heard of phosphorus before, which is crazy because if diabetes is the #1 contributor to heart disease, or at least one of the top contributors to heart disease, if it's not #1, phosphorus has a lot to do with that. But when you think about diabetes, you're not thinking about phosphorus. And that's a whole nother lecture within itself, because those lead to interesting, very interesting questions. Okay? So, it's a lot, right? This is the case with all the nutrients, whether we're talking about vitamin D and vitamin K and that ratio, which also relates to calcium, you know, whether we're talking about certain amino acids, the proper ratio they supposed to be taken in, you know, it's balanced with it all. It's balanced with it all. And when there's an imbalance, there's disease. There's disease in the body. And you may seem fine. Some of these things may not even be picked up from your doctor, but you just never know. It's crazy. I didn't see too many people who seem healthy just drop dead out the blue. And from what I know and remember of them, they weren't health conscious. Most of us aren't, because we aren't educated properly. So we have to take our health into our own hands. And it's difficult for me to not believe that they didn't plan us into the situation, seeing as how money's involved, and we live in a capitalist nation, a capitalist society, a capitalist world. There's no incentive. If there's not a financial incentive, there's usually no incentive, because that's the ultimate incentive. It's finance. They don't have a reason to tell you these things. Okay? So, go to freedomoverfailure.com. Okay? Well, I just put it in the description. So, freedomoverfailure.com. So, learn more and subscribe. You know, I go in on health, wealth, and knowledge all the time. I also have meal plans, and when you know, so with the meal plans, I'm making sure the balances is right. And one person may need a little bit more of magnesium than this person, or a little bit less of selenium than that person. You know, so we go through all of that. We want to make sure everybody, you know, you may even think that you're healthy. Still, tap in. I mean, even if not to buy a meal plan, just tap into the information so we could know what's going on. We have to educate ourselves. We got to take our health serious. All right, Freedom Over Failure. I'll check you out on the next one.